Okay, everybody, hello again, and really thank that you decided to join our presentation, even when you know it's one of the last presentation for this year Code Talks. We really appreciate it. So, first of all, I want to present what it will be presented during this presentation. So today we will first of all introduce ourselves with my colleague, then we will talk a lot of fraud prevention, the fingerprinting itself, and we prepared some live demo to actually show how it works in the real fraud prevention tools world. Okay, let's start it. One thing we forgot to mention. So we prepared this dashboard where you can join by the device hashtag, and during the presentation, if you find some questions you wanted to ask, you can print them there, and after the code talk we can go sequentially through them and in parallel answer questions via the microphone. Okay, let's start with the introduction. So, my colleague Amadou.
Hello everyone. My name is Amadou Cissé. I'm a senior Scala developer at RiskIdent. Before joining RiskIdent, I worked in Morocco as a Scala developer. And what I can say is that it was always about Scala, it was always about the technical side. But joining Risk, it became more about fraud prevention. And this is a broad and very important topic. And I'm really excited to work in it. And I can say today I'm really excited to be sharing some of what we have learned with you guys. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amadou. So, my name is Taras. I'm a colleague of Amadou at RiskIdent, and I'm a Scala developer too. And I'm really proud that I'm a fraud prevention from some point, that I try to prevent the fraud in your lives, and it's really cool for me. But before we go deep in the presentation, I would like to share with you some story about one student and what happened with him back in the days in 2015. So that was the autumn, some evening, we spent some time with his back in the days future wife, and everything goes fine, but a few days before, his wife decided to offer or post some offers regarding photo lens, because she had a hobby photography, and she spared some lens in the background and she wanted to sell it. And exactly in that evening, this student had the call from one guy who introduced himself like a photo studio owner and say he's looked for this lens for a long time and he's really happy that he found this, and he not care about the cost, just send me your card number and everything will be fine. This student did so, and after a few minutes he get another call from the bank, and the bank guy says that the money from this account are frozen and you need to get another account to pay or receive this money, otherwise they will be blocked. Okay, he's decided call the parents, because you know that they work in banks here too, and this situation happened to his father and after this to his mother. And in that day, this guy's family was hit for a few months' salaries, and it was horrible that days. And this guy decided that it shouldn't be like this, that fraud somehow should be prevented, and his life became to the point when this guy is staying in front of you and want to present how to protect yourself in the internet to avoid such bad experience in your future life. Okay, let's start it with the entire presentation. Before we start talking about fraud prevention based on device fingerprinting, I would love you to talk about the fingerprinting itself. So first of all, it was started in 1901 and by Scotland Yard, where they established their first fingerprinting bureau. And the next year, it was used like evidences in English courts. And in 1903, it was adopted in the New York State prisons and then followed by FBI. So this has a huge impact for crime prevention and solving really difficult crime deals back in the days. But fraudsters became smarter and they started occupied not only real world, but they moved their procedure to the digital world. And I prepared a few interesting facts how it became more popular. So in 1994, e-commerce started to be proceed in the internet and became more popular and popular. And there were a few first steps by the fraudsters how they can do their deals in the digital world. First trends, it was famous names called, when the fraudsters stole the card of the popular celebrities of that days and tried to buy some stuff by these cards. This fraud works back in the days because the internet was really young and nobody cared about fraud and nobody even think that it could happen to their web shop. The next one, when fraudsters became a bit smarter, they start providing some card generator applications and use them to do their fraud deals. And in 98, they first start usage of duplicates of real merchant site to collect all possible information about the customers, I mean card numbers, cardholder names, and so on. Then after some period of time, they just close all the doors to the web shop, leave the country before the cardholder can understand something. Few more facts. So, do you know maybe that back in the days in 2017, as of May, Facebook has 600 Facebook accounts compromised every single day. Or another one, the most expensive virus caused damages by $38.5 billion. And this is just a few of them. Next one, have you know that Amazon Web Services contains 23% of fraudulent accounts, so the accounts which really use for fraud, I mean IPs, servers, and so on. And if we are talking about the global cloud services, there are about 18% of all accounts in all cloud services used for fraud. But how fraudulent do they stop? How they prepare everything? And I prepared few cases how it's going on. So first of all, they need the possibility to pay for their goods. How they can do so? They can go to the dark web, buy some information regarding cardholder, then use this information in the merchant website, buy some stuff. If merchant has not enough security on their fraud prevention sphere, they will send their goods to this fraudster, and then the cardholder will see some charges from his bank account. He will contact bank, and our merchant will be hit because of chargeback and fees. But fraudsters still have the goods and can sell them via eBay or back to the dark web. Another one, delivery and returns fraud. I have few cases how to describe it. So maybe you know, back in the days, Amazon had a really big problem because of this type of fraud. When, for example, some fraudster order some iPhone or MacBook or what else, then he sent it back, but filling the package not with MacBook, but for example with sand. And Amazon get it back, send back money, and nobody cares after some time when Amazon decided to check what they already had in returned items. Next type of fraud, I think it's the most important type of fraud for fraudsters, because without it, any kind of fraud wouldn't be possible. So account takeover. I think most of you some days received some suspicious email where you asked for example, they say that your Facebook account was compromised, please approve yourself by this link, blah, blah, blah. You go in there, you fill in the form, but this data going not to Facebook, but to the database of the fraudsters, which then change the password, and you can forget about your account. But how do they do it? How do they prepare this stuff? So how can they do these fraudulent deals? So first of all, use of prevents privacy software. As you may know, there are a lot of fraud prevention tools based on the device fingerprinting, and these tools can help them spoof themselves. So by using one device, they can say that they're doing deals from different devices. But this topic will be described a bit deeper with my colleague in a few next slides. The next one, location spoofing. Just imagine that fraudster gets some bank account from a guy who located in Berlin, but he wants to do the fraud in Hamburg, and he located in Hamburg. And now there are some mismatch that his location in Hamburg, but cardholder in Berlin. Something strange. And this is exactly why they do this location spoof. They're using some VPN or proxy to change their IP and change their real location. They even can call your mobile service providers to get some details of your last calls and use this information in the approval of their purchase. And the most important, they start simulate the buyer behavior, because back in the days there was when they created some account in online web shop, they try to immediately buy something really expensive. So just create account and buy some stuff for $11,000 and that's it. Then they became smarter. They start providing some buyer history, buy some small stuff in a few weeks, and then bam, they did this big deal, and that works. Now, as I mentioned before, we will talk a bit about fraud tools by my colleague.
Thanks, Taras. Okay, fraud tools. First of all, what are fraud tools? As my colleague mentioned, fraudsters use tools to make it impossible to fingerprint their devices, right? So the first thing you need to understand is what are fraud tools. This is software used by fraudsters to prevent device fingerprinting. Next, to spoof or hide information that is provided by the JavaScript APIs in their browsers, because these are the APIs we use to gather information about their browsers and subsequently create fingerprints. So imagine, for example, you have virtual browsers. Someone could be using a Chrome browser on Windows and then somehow change this configuration to look like he's using Safari on iOS, for example. So let's take a look at some of the tools we have on the market for this kind of stuff. The first one is FraudFox. This one is a Windows 7 virtual machine, which calls itself a spoofing engine. What it does is that it creates random or some form of configuration that will give you a new browser whenever you use it. This new browser returns different values for JavaScript APIs, so it is impossible to fingerprint this browser. The next one is Anti-Detect. Anti-Detect is different from FraudFox in that it gives you very low level, it makes it possible to change very low level APIs like Canvas, WebGL, audio, and even your screen size. It has a huge community online, and from this community you can actually access their database and download configurations that you can use. So if you are using a MacBook and you want to look like you are using iOS, you just need to click and download a configuration and then load a new browser and you're good to go. The next one is multi-login. Multi-login is like in the middle of Anti-Detect and FraudFox, in that it provides more tools. Like it has 2 custom browsers that are created specifically for this, which are called Mimic and StealthFox. It's very, very easy to automate, and it uses a different approach from the previous ones in that it changes the fingerprint that is generated on the fly, making it impossible, even more impossible to detect. Last but not least, we'll talk about bots. Bots are not actually software, they are more like hardware. Imagine you have a room or dark room somewhere, and you have computers, and then you have a robot, some type of robot controlling these computers. Each one of these computers can have one of the previously mentioned fraud tools, that makes it impossible to fingerprint. But I would like to state that these tools mentioned are not necessarily used for only fraud, right? Some people can use these tools to have better privacy. Some people can use it for research or even social media marketing. Now with this, I want to get back to Taras to tell you about the impact fraud has on our lives.
Okay, thank you, Amadou, for your excursus for fraud tools. Now we get back for boring statistic and numbers. So by this figure, you can see the frequency of successful cyber attacks by the year. So the picture not so positive. The next one, so maybe you know that in between of 2012 and 2017, the losses because of stolen cryptocurrencies were about $15 billion. Or next one, that because of the business emails compromised in between of 2013 and 2018, they were damaged by $12.5 billion. It's impressive numbers, no? But what we can do to prevent so? And now we are getting to the point when we will start to talk about the fraud prevention tool. So, as you may know, how it works now with fraudster behavior, how they do their deals. So they are trying to buy some stuff in the dark web, like card name, card holder name, and so on. Then they buy some stuff in online merchant site. If the merchant doesn't have any online prevention tools or any online prevention procedure, these cards will go to the fraudster and merchant will be damaged. But if merchants start use online fraud prevention tools in between when fraudsters will do their transactions, the data about the device will come to the fraud prevention tool, and if this device were ever seen in fraudulent procedure, the merchant will know this, will double check, and then more than 100% sure that we'll cancel this transaction. But now you can say that, okay, but using of privacy, using of customer data, it's not legal. Yes, you're right, but if we are talking about fraud prevention, especially what we are doing, it's a device fingerprinting. We are not using the customer-related data, such like name, email account, card number, and so on. Our specialization only the device information, user agent, cookie, and so on. And why I want to talk about the GDPR, I just want to say the pros and cons of this new regulation for fraud prevention sphere. So first of all, regarding pros, I think because of new requirements to the cybersecurity in the companies which really working with fraud prevention sphere, their cybersecurity departments will be on the new level. And there are such companies which really matched for GDPR requirements, they will have more trustness by customers, because customers always know that they can ask this merchant which kind of data they stored for them, and they will be sure that this data couldn't be gone by some fraudsters. But regarding the consequences of such regulations would be that the cost of development and maintaining of fraud prevention tools will be increased, because there will be more requirements regarding how to deal with some kind of customers' data, how to store them, and in which type. And now we know that fraud prevention can try to secure yourself. GDPR can do so, but how you can do it by your own. So get back to my colleague.
So how do you protect yourself online? Personally, I believe you should do a lot of research and learn more about this stuff so you can know how to better protect yourself. But why do you need to protect yourself? Like, I am doing fraud prevention. If you guys might be wondering, if you protect yourself better, wouldn't that make my job more difficult? And the answer is no, of course not. If you protect yourself better, it will make it easier for us to do our work, because we will not have much more false positives in our job. So the first thing, why do you need to protect yourself? device fingerprinting is what we use to detect fraudsters, but it is also used for other things like tracking user movement across the internet. This makes it really important for you to learn how to protect yourself to avoid being tracked on the internet. So let's look at some tips on how you can do this. Well, the first thing, as usual, is to know yourself. You can visit any one of these sites, and they will tell you how resistant your browser is to fingerprinting. They can also tell you if your browser is not the latest browser or unstable. And they can also give you some tips also about how you can increase your privacy. The next one is to avoid phishing attacks by knowing who you can trust. You shouldn't just click on any link because it looks like Gmail or it looks like Facebook. One of the ways that the first thing usually that fraudsters need is to get user information. And one of the ways they can get this is using phishing attacks. Next, you should make sure that you always use the latest stable software. This is really important because most software vendors are doing everything they can to avoid, to make it more difficult to fingerprint devices. For example, Apple uses Internet Tracking Protocol to make it impossible to track users. And Android has something like MAC address randomization, which makes it really difficult to identify an Android device. Third, this is more like an advice on how you can protect yourself in the long term. So disabling third-party cookies makes it difficult for advertisers to track you on the internet. Deleting your browser in cache makes it look like you are a new browser, you are a new person whenever you do this, which means that you don't know who you are anymore. And like I said, Safari is like very good at doing this, and it is recommended to use it for stuff. Yeah, passwords. Well, I'm not sure about you guys, but most people have bad habits when it comes to passwords. Reusing the same passwords over and over, or using simple passwords. Well, the simple advice is use a password manager. We're in 2019 and it is safe. Also, one other important thing is to verify if your password is not already compromised. There are huge databases online of passwords that have already been compromised, and using them is dangerous. If you are using any one of these tools, chances are they are already doing this for you. They are already verifying your password in the background. And we cannot say everything, but here are other tips you can use. Private browsing. There are extensions for all modern browsers like AdBlock, Privacy Badger. And if you are a really power user and you want to go deeper, you can disable JavaScript, or you can use a trusted VPN. Now back to Taras to tell you more about online fingerprinting.
Okay, thank you, Amadou. So, as you already know about fraud tools, why they use them for prevent the online fingerprinting. But what is the digital online fingerprinting? I think you may all know that each device has his own unique characteristic, for example, like cookies, user agent, OS, canvas, IP, and so on. Some of them really easy to spoof, some of them not. And now we want to provide some live demo. We would ask you go to this link, and right after we would provide you statistic, and we'll show you how deep the rabbit hole actually is. We can give you 1 minute. Okay, who is already finished? Okay. Okay, what just actually happened? So you load one HTML page which contained special JavaScript which grab information, some basic information about your mobile phone, especially from what I see here. And Now we want to show you which kind of data we collected. Okay, so as we may see that the most popular operation system in this audience is the Android system. Cool. And the most popular browser, Chrome Mobile. Some of you use Firefox. Maybe you already recognize your device ID. Okay. So the next interesting statistic, operation systems. Operation systems and GPU information. So again, Android system and some mobile GPUs. Interesting. Okay. And in this graph, you even can see how many times you try to reload the page. So for example, this one reload 3 times, this guy 9 times, and I think I can find myself because it should be most reloaded because of debugging. And one more interesting, how many guys are using the VPN in this audience? Actually no one. Okay. Back to our presentation. So, which kind of tools we use to deliver such kind of stuff? So, as you may understand, we are Scala developers. We are really big fans of Scala and Play framework, which we actually use to grab the information from JavaScript part, which load the information about your device. Then we store everything in PostgreSQL, and to communicate it with Scala, we use the Sleek. To represent this data, these graphs, we use Tableau system. And now we want to talk about the future and what we think about fraud prevention in future. First of all, we think that artificial intelligence will be more and more involved in such kind of procedure. But there still will be some decision-making trees and rule-based drivers too. And the most important, I think, it should be never reduced from this procedure, it's a human decision in between. Because at the moment, artificial intelligence couldn't have enough intuition to see that this device really depends to this one, and this is really important. Plus, we think that online privacy will be really on the nice level in the future because of such regulation like GDPR, and think there will be more in future. Users will really feel themselves in internet much more secure. But for sure, fraudsters will still do some their stuff, they will never sleep. But I think we can tell you that you shouldn't worry because we will not sleep too. Thank you. So if you want to join us, as you may know, we are hiring, so this is our contact pages, you can double check them later. And now to the question part. Okay, we're nothing collected, let's maybe do live session.
Thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask, you have told that browsers already try to block fingerprinting. How long would it be viable to use it at all?
So the question is, you want to answer? Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for the question. Actually, that's a really relevant question. Yeah, right now browsers are doing all they can to avoid fingerprinting. And it becomes very, very difficult to collect more information. What this means is that we need to evolve to find new ways to do fingerprinting and to do fraud prevention with all these constraints that we have. And we do have ideas about this for the future, and we do have other sources of information, not only the browser that we cannot tell you about, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I can ask one more. So you told a little about GDPR. Is it still is fingerprinting person-related information, or is it not?
Okay, as I said during the presentation, there are some software which use customer-related data in the fingerprinting, but if you're talking about only device fingerprinting, then most of the data allowed by the GDPR, and if some of them not allowed to use in the native way, there are possibilities for anonymization of this data to prevent if there will be some data losses, some damage for customers.
Thanks.
Quick practical question. On the list of password managing tools, I missed KeePass, which is extremely popular. Is it because it's somehow compromised or not sufficiently secure?
No, not at all. We cannot fit every password manager on the planet here, so we just list the few ones that we have experience with. But of course, KeePass is also a good one. Yeah.
I could say best one.
It might be necessary to ask the user for consent to use cookies in the future. You might hear about the case, a legal case a few weeks ago. So how do you plan to handle that in the future?
Yeah. Right now we have, this is a confusing case because some browsers like Safari implement ITP, Internet Tracking Protocol, since 2017, which flags some sites and prevent them from saving cookies. They have an API that you can use to ask users to accept, to let you collect the cookies. But yeah, this is not an ideal solution for fraud prevention. So what we're doing right now is we are being selective. When it comes to Safari, this is what we do. When it comes to other browsers that allow us to collect cookies, we'll collect them. But of course, this is a contentious subject, and it is currently being investigated if we can continue collecting cookies or not. I also want to mention that cookies is not the only way of doing fraud prevention, it's just one of the ways. So even if it is not a viable way in the future, it doesn't prevent us from going further. Thanks.
Do you think it's a good idea to store all your passwords in one password manager, like LastPass, for example?
I think this is based on how paranoid you are. I cannot give you an advice on that. I'll just say, like, follow your instinct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I was wondering, so we keep hearing that using, for instance, Android is much better because it's open source, anyone can audit it. Effectively, are people actually looking into it? Is it really that much more secure? What are your thoughts about it?
Are you asking if Android is more secure?
Or at least since it's easier to look into, so it's more transparent, and we should be able to audit it. So are there people actually doing that?
Okay, historically, Android has had more security problems compared to competition like iOS, but I can say that newer versions of Android are more secure. Like if you're on Android 9 or 10, you can rest assured. My personal opinion is that open source tools are more secure, so I'm on the Android side. But yeah, that's just my opinion.
So want to be safe today against potential fraud or someone trying to leak things from a browser?
Yes. I can tell you that Android 10, for example, does this MAC address randomization. So every app on your device that asks for your MAC address gets another one. That's on Android 10. If you're still using something like Android 6, then yeah, you're not protected. This is not the only one. There are others, like Android 10 prevents developers from accessing your unique ID and etc. So yeah, I can say it's pretty secure if you're on newer versions.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we don't have any questions. So short disclaimer, because before we finish at all, this data which was collected through the demo page will be deleted right after conference, so you shouldn't be worried because of it. So thank you again.
Thank you.